Hi, this is John Hope Bryant, founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of Operation Hope. I'm honored here to introduce you to a new friend at the Hope Global Forum annual meeting 2021, meeting the moment. Coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. That's an Ambassador Andrew Young quote, the co-chair for this forum and Dr. King's right arm in the civil rights movement. Coincidence is God's way of saying anonymous. What are the chances that a ethnically Chinese, Taiwanese-born global citizen who happens to be Asian, an attorney who comes up through the ranks, would be the acting comptroller of the currency for the United States of America, the largest economy on the planet, in the midst of a 400-year-old social justice reckoning on Black America, a health pandemic that's the worst since the Spanish flu, an attack on our democracy that we haven't seen since 1812, and that was the British attacking America. This is Americans attacking Americans. And an economic crisis of unemployment that what rivals the Great Depression, and the dislocation that has come as a result of technology latching on to the economy and one group taking off and one group seemingly being left behind. To have an ethnic minority in this post, I believe for the first time in history, you can't make this up. I think the numbers are correct, and the comptroller will correct me or accurately state when he speaks. Something like 70 cents of every dollar financed in this country goes through an institution that he regulates. He'll get into it in a minute, but one of my other sort of heartfelt connections to his role is the Freedmen's Bank of 1865, the bank that Abraham Lincoln chartered to teach free slaves about money. And unfortunately, Lincoln was assassinated a month after that. But that bank in 1865, after the Civil War, that was an OCC bank. A comptroller of the currency of that era would have regulated this institution, chartered to teach free slaves about money in the free enterprise system, what I call financial literacy today. Everybody welcome. Help me welcome our new friend, Acting Comptroller Mike Hsu.
John, thank you for that very, very warm welcome. I'm really honored and excited to be here.
Honored to have you here. And we were talking about the three different ways that one can say your name. Hopefully I did it. I did it with some elegance, but it has a lot of, culture, like his name, is both complicated and beautiful. And the comptroller has done a good job of making people comfortable with saying his name, being in his presence, approaching regulation, trying to attach social justice, what I call through an economic lens, to his role, which I think is extraordinary. And I don't think it's been done by any comptroller in this way before his tenure. So I want to get into this and understand a bit more about you, yes, your story and how that relates to what's going on now. Can you relate, frankly, to what's going on right now? Do you feel in some way some of this, for lack of a better word, pain? And also, like, what do you make of this moment? I've said that, you've heard me say this, that history doesn't feel historic when you're sitting in it. It just feels like another day. But that doesn't mean the moment is not historic. I personally believe we're sitting in what I call the third Reconstruction. I believe that the next 10 years will define certainly the next 50, if not set the tone for the next 100. What we do now matters. So what do you make of this moment? For question number one, do you agree that it's historic? Question number two, what role do you see the OCC playing in the midst of all this and other federal regulators? I think that the federal banking regulators are sort of the Justice Department of the 21st century, of what the Justice Department was in the 20th century. The federal regulators are as gatekeepers for free enterprise, capitalism, economics, ownership, access to capital, and opportunity in the 21st century, because you cannot uplift a neighborhood or community without banking, or a society, an economy. So have you taken a more conservative, traditional view, well, we do nothing? Or have you taken a more, what I'll call it enlightened view, that we should do something? And if so, what is that? What is an example of that something? And I want to get to at some point an initiative that you and I are together involved with. So, Mr. Comptroller.
So, John, let me talk first about the moment in history. I strongly agree with you. I think we're at a very unique time right now. And obviously, there's a whole lot of change going on. And anytime you have that much change going on, you've got risks and you've got opportunities. And I think there has really been, I think one thing the pandemic has given to us, I think, is a chance to really reflect individually on our families, on who we are, what are we doing, why are we doing it, what does it all mean? And I think it's not a coincidence that post George Floyd, you have kind of a national reckoning on a whole series of issues. It's not just racial justice. I think there's a whole series of things from policing all the way to banking and finance. And I don't think it's a coincidence that happened during a pandemic, during this time where we were really kind of jostled out of our day-to-day and put in a different environment and really thinking hard about, okay, what does this all mean? And so I think that there is this opportunity to define that. We get a chance to have a conversation, at the dinner table with our colleagues, with people we agree and disagree with, to say, what is this all, where are we going and why are we going there? So I think that's really, really important. I think that kind of shapes, that's why it's so important to have forums to talk this stuff out. Now, coming into this, I think we got a lot of history, right? There's a lot of things. And I think for the banking industry, I don't think about things in terms of conservative or not conservative or progressive or enlightened. I'm really, really, really focused on trust.
Right.
Banking relies on trust. It is
right.
One of the industries where money is trust. That it's all about trust. And if the trust is there, you can unlock huge amounts of potential. And that's fantastic.
If it's broken, you have disconnection.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's a lot of ramifications to that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, please continue.
I'm sorry. So that just informs a lot of my thinking. And I've the 2008 financial crisis was a very defining event for me. I saw that from a number of different perspectives. In my seat in government, I've been a career public servant. So just from the SEC, from Treasury, from the IMF, from the Fed. And, I can't tell you how many times I would go to I'd meet up with friends or family, even to this day, and people still say, how come no one went to jail? How did that happen? And I think that casts a long shadow. And then you say, well, in what other ways is the banking system or the financial system, why is it important that they treat customers fairly and not discriminate? Well, part of it's because that's the law. That's what the law says, because we have decided as a society that's the law. But more importantly, because it builds trust. If you don't do that, you can't build trust. And so I think now is a really opportune time. I've highlighted reducing inequality as a priority. It's not just a feel-good priority. I really do believe, if we don't get that right, trust in banking will further erode. And then people are going to look to other things to where they put their money. And I think that it's safest and best in the banking system.
You actually said something that's more important than being enlightened. I use the phrase enlightened. You rightly so rejected that and replaced it with trust. Well, trust is tied to faith and tied to love and tied to justice and gives you hope. If you don't have trust, it's hard to have faith. um, if you don't have faith, it's hard to believe, and it makes it tougher to love. And all that makes it tougher to have hope. And that leads to enlightenment. So I really like your definition of progress better than mine. It is about, and so you're taking this issue on. You're taking this issue head on as the first, correct me if I'm wrong, Asian official to be in this role in the history of this agency.
Yeah.
Because in part, I believe you personally feel and have felt, and your family has felt, and people you know have felt, the inequality we're talking about. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. So I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and my dad was an immigrant, comes here, doesn't really speak the language, and I just remember as a kid. He was a doctor, so he worked at the main city hospital at Grant, but we didn't really know anything. And for the summers, parents didn't really know what to do with us, with me and my brother, and so they would just take us to the cheapest pool, the least expensive pool to go to, which was basically an inner city pool, hunter pool, and Tuttle pool. And so we spent a lot of time. Yeah, we spent a lot of time just we're pool rats with lots of people of I would say moderate means, middle class, lower class, and it was, as a kid, you don't know any of these differences. These are your friends. These are people you just hang out with. And as I got older, I could see more and more differences in terms of outcomes, and it felt really unfair to me. There wasn't that much separating us in terms of values, just like, why are there such big differences when there's not that, when the differences in character are not that different? It just doesn't feel quite fair. And then you start to realize over time that there's a lot of it is about potential and what potential could be achieved. And a lot of that's luck. And so, if we have a system where there's change and that potential can be tapped fairly, that's fantastic. I think that's the promise of America. That's why people come here. That's what makes America awesome. Increasingly, though, if folks are trapped, that's a problem. And I think with inequality and banking's role in that's something that we need to address. And I think the good news is there are some banks now who they really understand this. They're addressing it. They're innovating. They're doing the right things. I think we just need to do that on a broader basis, more concerted, faster. And I think that's luckily Project Reach is a great example. I mean, I think John, you're co-founding of that. I think that's kind of it's the core of that effort is really pointed in that direction. And the fact that you're getting a lot of banks, community groups, tech companies all coming together to solve these problems collectively, that's what it's all about.
Why don't you talk a little bit more about Project Reach? You mentioned it. I'm honored to be involved with it. Rovetta Garnier, who's the highest ranking person of color, African American female at the agency, deeply involved with it, who I respect, and a lot of other heroes and sheroes there, and outside the agency. But this is pretty extraordinary that the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, is doing this. And by the way, before we go any further, Wall Street understands your role. Banking understands your role. Main Street watching this may not understand what the heck the Comptroller of the Currency is. Before you talk about Project Reach, can you just give a couple of stats, facts, figures on how big, how wide, how deep, what's the impact of the OCC today?
Sure. So the OCC regulates and supervises national banks and federal savings associations. Put that in context, that's about 70% of the total commercial banking assets of the whole country are OCC regulated. So you were right, John, the way you described that earlier. So that we have a pretty big role in kind of regulating and supervising that part of the financial system. It's over 1,000. Yeah, it's over 1,000 banks that we're talking about. And of course, it ranges from community banks all the way up to JP Morgan Chase. Right. So we got and everything in between. So we've and I've been a financial supervisor my whole professional career, and this is super interesting and some of the best work I've done. And I'm really honored to be doing it and really enjoying it. Project Reach. When I came in, I had heard about Project Reach kind of on the side, but when I got here, I really kind of got in the weeds. And man, the more I learned about it, I just got really excited because it is really unusual. I've been at multiple government agencies doing a lot of different things, a lot of innovative things. Reach is definitely one of the most innovative. Government agencies don't do this kind of thing, using the convening power to bring together groups that normally don't come together to say, hey, what is our shared problem? We have a shared problem here on financial inclusion. We all agree on that. Mm-hmm. How are we going to attack this problem? And it wasn't us dictating things. It was us bringing folks together to say, let's work together to identify the problem and identify solutions.
Right.
And that has been very energizing. I mean, I think that, credit invisibles, 45 million people without credit scores. How do we solve that? Right? Affordable housing. Long-standing problem, the key to building wealth. How do we solve that? Minority depository institutions. Got to revitalize these banks, which are key. They're foundational to a lot of communities in terms of their access to banking services and credit. How do we solve that? So this is. We had the 1-year anniversary earlier this year. John, you're a huge part of this. I think you're a huge inspiration for. But everyone who comes to the table is really excited. They're excited to make progress on these things in a way they can take off their institutional hat and put on a bit more of a Team America. How do we do this? And I think that's really exciting.
So I want to give Andrew Moss some love, and I started naming names, started getting dangerous, but there are some folks there who've been really individually, uniquely helpful in advancing the ball on this work. But I was trading text messages, emails yesterday with Jamie Dimon, because he was with the president talking about the issue of raising our debt ceiling. And there was a lot of other CEOs that came together and told everybody, just knock it off. Like this is something that's good for America, and it's ridiculous we're even talking about it. And I just commended Jamie for doing it, said him thank you. And he sent me a note back, and it had 5 American flags and an applause. He was using emojis, and it just touched me in my heart. It wasn't like some pat saying, wasn't thank you, John. It was him emotionally saying, we're Americans right now.
Yeah.
This is not about partisan politics. This is not about games. This is not about who wins and who. No. We're talking about rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic. We're picking drapes, but the whole ship is sinking if we get this stuff wrong. And you and I were talking before we came on live about, it's so important we all get this right, this moment. And the concern of what happens if we don't get it right, generations yet unborn will deal with the trauma, the drama, the debt, the liabilities, the lack of resources from us not executing on a business plan for the rest of our lives. I love what you just said about it's about all of us. I love what Jamie Dimon said about it's about all of us. I love that these meetings that we have, there's never any agenda in them. They're not even, and here's what stuns me, because it includes banks that I presume you regulate as well as institutions that you don't regulate. I have never in all the time gotten a sense that they're trying to curry any favor with you. Let me rephrase that. Of course they're trying to curry favor, but they're not trying to ask you, they're not doing it trying to sort of influence your decision on them in real time. They're not asking you for anything. There's no horse trading here. They're like literally trying to solve this problem. Now, do they want to look good in the middle of this? Of course they do, right? That's common sense. But they literally are leaning in saying, This is something the market, free enterprise, capitalism can solve.
Yeah.
And
I couldn't agree with you more, John. And what I really, I think what makes it different, what feels different to me about it, it doesn't feel transactional. I think there have been attempts in the past to, to promote diversity, to do, quote unquote, the right thing, but inevitably it falls into a little bit more marketing than substance. And on this particular set of issues, it feels very genuine. A great example: MDIs. Right? Minority depository institutions. We've got this pledge. So 23 banks have signed the pledge. It's not just money. There is money. Money is important. Capital is important. There's technical assistance. There's training. There's everything, because you can't just throw money at that problem, right? If you really want to grow those institutions, you got to be able to grow capacity. And there's a rotation program with Citigroup to one of the MDIs, hugely successful. I think we're going to see more of that. That's relational. And I think that's really, really critical to getting these things done. And it's not being dictated by a set of rules. I think this really is folks coming together and say, how do we want to interact to solve these problems? And I think that's partly the intentions and leadership and in the moment. I think we're in the moment.
No, I absolutely agree. Can you, unfortunately, I love when I have these conversations. I enjoy it. We always run out of time. You got to go run the financial world here soon. As we begin to close up, can you get into a bit more of the weeds for people who may not truly understand the nomenclature, the technical terms? What's the practical impact for the average everyday American on a couple of the pieces on Project Reach? And also, are there other things that you're doing at the OCC that you would like the world to know about? Likewise, I want to also commend, before we wrap up, Comptroller Otting and the acting comptrollers who've also sort of tried to lean into this, and the comptrollers that came before this, Comptroller Ludwig. There's a whole series of comptrollers who were appointed by Republican and Democratic presidents who have cared about this issue. In your office, I believe there is a plaque for the Freedmen's Bank, and there is also a plaque that salutes Black women and women achievement at the OCC. These are things that you walk in your office, you wouldn't, your ceremonial office, people wouldn't see. There's a heart, there's a soul. The comptroller of the currency has won the Nobel Peace Prize back in the 20th century. People would never think that this has an emotion to it. So as we wrap up, what's the emotion for you? What's the connection between the tissue between how you grew up, all your jobs internationally and domestically, from IMF to Treasury, et cetera, to your role as an attorney, this role as an acting comptroller at this historic moment in time? And what does this mean? And what is the hope that this means for the average everyday American? And be as specific or as you want to be.
So I think the hope is that we basically are restoring, to use I think it's the right word. It's a restoration of trust.
Yeah.
Like we over the past decade, I think there's been a sense that, probably longer than the past decade, but the sense that institutions, whether it's government, corporations, large, have taken people for granted.
Yeah.
And that's not right. I think we need to be in a place where people need to feel like my government, my bank, my institutions have my back.
Yes.
And if you feel that, you can achieve a lot. It really unlocks a lot that's out there. And I think that we are now in a moment where banking leaders, community group leaders like yourself, government leaders, I'm not alone, feel like, okay, we have an opportunity to change this. And we're going to change it. We got a plan. We got things to work on. Specifics, Community Reinvestment Act. That has not been revised since 1995. My predecessor tried here at the OCC to move that ball forward on our own. We did a review saying, okay, let's step back. Let's go back, circle back with the Fed and the FDIC. Let's do this together. Let's strengthen and modernize the CRA, and let's do that together. Pair that with Project Reach. Pair that with the reforms you're seeing on like overdrafts. Like, why does overdrafts matter? It's expensive to be poor. Part of that expense is overdrafts. If you can reform that, empower people, and enable their financial capacity while bringing down the expense, people will feel like, my bank's got my back. I can trust my bank. I can trust that my regulator has worked with the bank to do that. I can trust my regulator. Okay,
right.
That's a very hopeful world. I think if you get there, you can accomplish whatever you need to accomplish, and you're not. It's just a better place to be for everybody. And I do sense that there's some momentum on this. And if there's momentum, we're going to go. That's the task.
PhDs are good. PhDs are better.
Amen.
Is there anything, Comptroller, that you want the public and institutions and companies to hear from you as we close of how they might be able to help? Question number one. Let me switch this. Can you tell can you give the public one, two, you've already mentioned the focus on MDIs, minority depository institutions, for those of you who don't know that, banks, basically, Black and Latino and Asian-owned, minority-owned banks. Are there one or two other things you want people to hear about and to watch out for in the future on progress? Because I know there are other reach initiatives going on in individual cities that are sort of going to hit the ground. Number two, is there anything that you want people to know that they can help if they want to take action from after hearing us today?
So I guess I would direct it. It depends on the audience. So one area where that we haven't talked about, but I would like to address, is that there's a lot of talk on innovation. We're talking about financial technology companies, shorthand fintechs, cryptocurrencies, like a lot of innovation in cryptocurrencies. And there's a lot of buzz around that. And I am pro-innovation. Innovation is good. In the banking finance space, it's got to be responsible, because you're dealing with people's money, right? It's not just a gadget. This is people's money. And I think that is very important to bear in mind. And what I want to tell the fintech and the crypto industry is be responsible. Do your thing, innovate, do great things, but you got to be responsible. And there's got to be some adults in the room who call that out. We regulators, we're going to do our jobs the way we need to do our jobs. These things are way more powerful if they're done from within. And I see promise, and I see some dangerous things. And I think that we need to be conscious of that. And that goes for both the industry and for users, people who are interested in getting involved, say in crypto. Be careful. There is some promise there, but be careful. There are scams. There are challenges. And it's your money. Be careful with your money. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure we safeguard that for you through the banking system. But that's something to just bear in mind.
There's a reason why bad guys around the world love crypto. Because, it has unique attributes to it. And, when the internet went down, when the couple of major social media platforms were compromised not so long ago and were down for half a day, not only did social influencers lose their mind for half a day because that's their revenue and their livelihood, and they had no control over it. But I'm telling people, look, if all of your ads, first of all, you should never do cryptocurrency or digital currency with your rent money. If you're going to do this, understand it at the moment it is speculative, and it's not proper investing yet, which doesn't mean it's not good. It means that it has a higher risk profile. But if you lose your password, you lose your digital code, you get amnesia, or God forbid the internet goes down, or you're disconnected from your perception of your value and maybe the reality of your value. You just hit me with something, and I know we have to wrap here, and the producers are going nuts, but you just inspired me, and I don't want to extend this to today, but I want to promise you, and hopefully we can work together on this. I'd like to do a special, separate forum on digital currency, cryptocurrency, innovation, and technology in the future. I think this deserves a special set aside meeting. Maybe we get the other regulators together and let's have a conversation. I don't think it's happened yet. I think it's really important to inform the public about some vision of where we're going. And I'd love to work with you on that, actually.
And John, I think it's super well timed, because there are some polls out now showing that who owns the most crypto? It's not rich people, actually. Morning Consult did a poll. Fully banked, 10% of them own crypto. The unbanked, 11%. Underbanked, 37%. 37%. Blacks, Hispanics, whites, blacks own crypto in the highest percentage. It's almost 30%.
Wow.
So, and I think that there's a reason for this. And I think that the reason is because the traditional banking system has let them down. That has to be recognized. They don't trust. And so these things all come together. And I think so. I'll sign up. I'm there. You can count me in. But we do need to have that conversation.
So, by the way, for the audience watching this has been, again, I'll end where I started. Ambassador Young, our co-chair and my mentor, would say, coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. We didn't plan this. We don't have a script. We're just talking. Yeah. But you want to know how things happen. You want to know how decisions get made. It's typically conversations like this. And then in the midst of it, there's something happens, and two folks who have the ability to move a needle on something say, hey, well, how about we do X, Y, and Z? And you just saw basically on live stream video network how something gets moved forward. We just agreed to try to do something for the public good that'll have hopefully a lot of positive consequences. But this is how a lot of decisions get made. And we want you increasingly in that room. We want to open the door so that you can represent not only your own interests, but the interests of others in a responsible way, so that we can make opportunity available for all of God's children. And so can you too. Mr. Comptroller, thank you so much. This has been inspiring.
Thank you, John.